I believe I figured out why so many people, why everyone hates Black and African people, like why there is such animosity towards our community across the world, whether you're in Europe, South America, Asia. For some reason, people have a problem. And I think that I figured it out. Now, sorry, I'm taking a walk on the beach front, so it's a little bit noisy because of the waves, but hopefully you can hear me. But the thoughts came to me and I wanted to document this as it was coming into my mind. So I didn't want to wait till I got back to the studio or anything like that to talk about this. But anyway, I'm going to tell you a story that illustrates this. So recently, I have a platform that is all about African current affairs, African history, and all of those things. Like that's what I really focus on, is African history and politics and current affairs. And really trying to build a bridge between Africa and the diaspora. So, you know, we've only been around for a couple of years, and we've grown exponentially. So in the last few months, we've gained maybe, like I said, 70 to 80,000. No, not even the last few months, the last 5 weeks. 70 to 80,000 subscribers, almost 80,000 subscribers in the last few weeks. And with that, I saw a change in the sort of comments that I was getting, which highlights exactly what I'm talking about here. So I started more about African history. And when I say African history, I'm talking about the hidden aspects of African history. You know, the concept of the, you know, obviously I did the true origin of Nigeria before, I did the true name of Africa, did the true size of Africa. And I started doing things like the first kingdom, the true queens of Africa, you know, the origin of time, the origin of Egypt, the true origin of Egypt. And then I started seeing these comments from people that aren't even from the, sorry guys, I had a little glitch there. So back to what I was saying. So I started seeing a lot of these comments that were coming up on my channel from people who seemed really angry that I was posting these materials or this information. And the people who were angry were like, you know, where are your sources? This is a lie. Why are you trying to steal history? You know, you're lying. Why are people listening to this idiot? And obviously the customary, we was kings and whatever. Like that's the customary one. But those people are illiterate, so I don't even bother with those. Those are like children. But more than a lot of folks were coming out and saying a lot of these crazy things. And I was looking at them and saying that, look, at the end of the day, why are you so concerned about what Africans are learning about their own history? If you're superior to us, why are you on an African or Pan-African channel focused on educating our people and criticizing the veracity of what I'm saying? So I started looking at the comments even closer, and I started finding a through line that really highlighted why I believe that so many people have a problem with Africans and Black folks. Guys, stay with me, guys. You know, that's why I had to come out here to do this talk, because this thing really just got me when I was, you know, out and about. So I started looking at it, and guys were like, you should want to know the truth. And I'm like, wait a second. You've spent the last, I don't know, 100, 200, 500 years corrupting history, lying about history, writing books and educational systems that omit hundreds of years of our history, wiping things out. You came to Africa, divided it, created these artificial borders. You took slaves to America. You cut them off from their history, then taught them a corrupted, fake version of history that begins and ends with you. You gave us Christianity, where we had to bow and worship gods that were in your image, and so on and so forth. None of these guys had a problem with that. And then I was thinking that, why is it that the only time you come to my channel or you have anything to say is when I'm saying something positive about Africa? And more importantly, like, not only am I saying something positive about Africa, if I'm saying something counter to your belief that Africa never had anything to do with civilization. Guys, stay with me, guys. So I was looking at it, and I was looking at the comments, and I said, oh, you know what? I see what's happening here. You see, the reality of white supremacy, the reality of the dominion that the dominant society has had over Africa and Black people is the illusion of Sorry, guys, I'm going to have to navigate a little bit here. Ooh, damn. The illusion of superiority. Now, in order to have an illusion or to create that illusion, you need to control information. You need to control education. You need to control the past. You need to control history. You need to control the narrative of the people that you're trying to subjugate. Guys, stay with me. So I saw that, you see, the issue here is that for all these centuries, we've not had the ability or the will. The will is actually a very, very important factor. The will to educate ourselves. We've been sold into this sort of mentality that it is for us to beg somebody else and to beg them that, you know, why don't you change your curriculum? Look at what you're doing. Look at the news. Look at all this information that you're putting out there. You're not telling us the truth about Africa. Why should they tell us the truth about Africa? Why should they tell us the truth about Africa? They don't benefit from that. But the people, and this is why I said that people really know what's going on. Why is everybody commenting on my page now? These white folks and people from Europe and Latin America, non-black folks, non-Africans, so concerned that I'm talking about positive things about my continent. Because in order for them to be superior, we need to be inferior. Stay with me, guys. Stay with me. Look at the beauty. Look at the beauty here. We need to be inferior. That's what the MEC is bringing out to you guys. That's the reason why the MEC's platform exists. That's why my platform exists. In order for them to be superior, we've got to be inferior. So the last thing they want is for this group of people that has been beaten down so much to start getting into a position where they actually have a history. They actually teach themselves and their children that we contributed meaningfully to civilization. And in fact, as some people have argued, Africans are the only people who ever had the original civilizations, because European civilizations were just warmongers. All they did was wage war and conquer. Civil, is that civil? To constantly be waging war and conquering people? We didn't conquer. Africa wasn't built on conquest. African kingdoms wasn't built on conquest. That is the reason why we were able to live side by side without borders. How were African kingdoms able to survive for thousands of years borderless? Because guys weren't afraid that somebody was going to come in and try and conquer them for no reason. African tribes or African kingdoms got conquered when the king was sloppy and the people wanted him gotten rid of. That's how it happened, folks. Let me get out of here a little bit. Got a little folks coming through. That's how it was. So then I figured it out and I said, oh, you know what? I figured it out and I said, you know what? I think I understand exactly what is going on. These folks require you to stay in your place. And that is the reason why we can't do that. That is the reason why this work is so important. Because I look at the comments, and you can go to the comments of my videos now and you'll see them everywhere. Any video where I talk about the greatness of Africa, Al-Kabolan, the videos are flooded with these guys who all of a sudden are very concerned with truth and proof. Now I'm going to ask you something, another question, folks. Stay with me, think about this. If somebody is asking for proof and evidence of the stuff I talk about when I talk about true ancient African history, where's the evidence supposed to come from? True, serious question. Because all the books in history class, all the archives in the libraries, all the documents that you can find, they're all written by your ancestors. The ancestors who lied, stole, cheated, pillaged, raped, destroyed, conquered, colonized, enslaved. They're the guys who wrote the history books. That's where we're supposed to find the evidence. What evidence are we going to find? What evidence are we going to find? You know? So for me, I'm looking at that situation and saying to myself that, oh, it's because you know we can't find the evidence. That's the reason why you're asking us to go and get proof. Because the way that I view it is like this. If you destroyed all the proof, your ancestors did, your ancestors burned things, destroyed things, stole things, hid things, manipulated things, where exactly is the proof supposed to come from? Because our perspective and the way that, sorry, the lifeguards here are blowing whistle, people are too deep in the ocean. Because the way that things are, and let me be real here, is guys strategically hid the stuff that I try and put out there. They strategically hid it. And the important thing is that folks need you to stay in a position of inferiority and begging and victimhood in order for them to feel comfortable. Because you have to remember, a lot of the people who are complaining about you talking, their entire existence, their entire superiority, their entire value, Martin Luther King talked about this, is based on being white, on having white skin and feeling like no matter how low I am, at least I'm better than you. That's the problem. That's what we're fighting against. This concept that we need to accept that position as Africans. We don't. So I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. And now that I understand the complexities of this thing, and now I understand the reason why, of course listen, how can you not hate and have animosity towards people that you, even in spite of all the abuse that you've done, all the advantages that you know you have inherently in society, all the thefts and these guys are still rocking. We're still here. This is what I feel, because I looked at my comments and it doesn't, I mean, on the surface, it doesn't make sense. And now that I've explained it, it makes sense. But why is that? Like, I'm not even spreading, these are the videos I have the most hate on are the ones when I'm not even talking about white society. I'm literally just saying, this is where we came from, this is what we did, these are the amazing things our African ancestors did. All of a sudden, you have a problem with that. Because I'm reframing what you believe the situation to be. Why do you care that the fact is that Africa is big enough to hold the United States, China, Europe, and all of these? That's how big Africa is. Why have you got an issue with that? What's the problem? The map is upside down. Of course it is. Because orientation is a choice. North, south, east, west. You make a decision. People are talking about compass, the north and the compass. I'm like, yeah, whatever the point the compass points to, it's your decision to call it what you want to call it. You could call it south if you want, tiddlywinks, whatever. You call it north and you say that's the top because of your perspective. All of a sudden, that's a problem. So we've got to accept your perspective. If you don't care about it and it doesn't matter what the perspective is, accept our perspective. Make Africa the top of the world. If we really don't care, you see, that's the acid test. If they really think this is a stupid argument, why don't you draw maps and draw everything where Africa is at the top of the world? Turn everything upside. Nobody cares, right? It doesn't matter. Why don't you do that? It's not rocket science, folks. It's not rocket science. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. That's what I think is going on. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to even be more aggressive now in the way that I talk about true African history. I'm going to be much more aggressive about it. And the channel is going to keep growing. Make sure that you're signed up to the newsletter. You're leaving comments. The newsletter is very important because that's how I stay in touch with everybody. And I do these sorts of videos, when things just hit me. I decide to do these sorts of videos, and that's why it's so important. And, maybe I'll put this in the member sections after a while, and I won't leave them up. Who knows? But yeah, guys, cheers.